Picture it, August 15, 1971. A quiet Sunday evening. Most Americans were settled in, watching their favorite television shows when suddenly, the broadcast cuts out. President Richard Nixon appears, his expression grim, delivering an announcement that would fundamentally rewire the entire global economy. He declared with a straight face that he was temporarily closing the gold window. Well, it has been over half a century since that temporary decision, and spoiler alert, that window is still welded shut. What transpired that night was far more than a simple policy adjustment. It was the precise moment your money ceased to be actual money and morphed into something else entirely. A government-issued IOU, a slip of paper backed by little more than good intentions and the ability to print more whenever the coffers run low. Ever since that fateful day, you have been subjected to a stealthy, invisible tax. This is not a tax that appears on your paycheck or has a line item on your annual return. Instead, it is a silent thief that has siphoned trillions of dollars from your savings, your salary, and your future, transferring that wealth directly to those with front-row seats to the money printer. If you have ever scratched your head wondering how your grandparents could afford a comfortable home on a single income while you can barely cover rent with two, this is the reason. If you have noticed that the price of everything keeps climbing while your salary seems stuck in neutral, you can thank this decision. If you feel like you are running twice as fast as previous generations just to fall further behind, you are not losing your mind. You are simply living with the consequences of a 50-year-old promise that most people still do not understand. Before we dive deeper into this rabbit hole, do me a favor and drop a comment below. Let me know where you are watching from, and what is one thing you wish you could afford that seemed easy for your parents or grandparents to buy. I make sure to read every single response. And if you are ready to finally grasp how money truly operates, and why the entire system feels so incredibly rigged, hit that subscribe button, because the events of 1971 are the key to unlocking almost everything that is wrong with our economy today. For the majority of American history, the dollar was more than just a piece of green paper. It was a claim ticket, a physical receipt for a specific amount of gold bullion held securely in government vaults. This system was known as the gold standard, and it meant that every single dollar in existence was backed by tangible, shimmering gold that you could, in theory, go and redeem. Under this standard, the government could not just fire up the printing presses on a whim. The total supply of money was tethered to the amount of gold in the vaults. If the government wanted to create more dollars, it first needed to acquire more gold. This provided a natural check, a hard limit on inflation, and a very effective brake on runaway government spending. For ordinary people, this meant something beautifully simple. Your savings actually held their value. If you had tucked away $100 in the year 1900, it would purchase roughly the same amount of goods and services in 1950. Your purchasing power remained remarkably stable. Money was a dependable store of value that you could count on across generations. But of course, the gold standard posed a major inconvenience for ambitious governments. It constrained their power. They could not finance endless wars. They could not run colossal deficits forever. They could not magically stimulate the economy by conjuring money out of thin air. The gold standard was a set of fiscal handcuffs, and by 1971, the United States government was desperate to pick the lock. By the late 1960s, America was facing a serious predicament. The Vietnam War was draining resources. The Great Society domestic programs carried a hefty price tag, and other nations, especially France, were beginning to notice a rather awkward discrepancy. The United States was printing far more dollars than it had gold to back them up. Under the Bretton Woods system, established after the Second World War, foreign governments had the right to exchange their U.S. dollars for gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. And they began to do just that. France, led by a skeptical Charles de Gaulle, started demanding physical gold for its mountains of dollar reserves. And soon, other countries followed suit. The gold was pouring out of Fort Knox. The jig was up. Nixon was cornered. He had two choices: either honor the long-standing commitment and watch the nation's gold reserves vanish, or simply break the promise altogether. He chose the latter. On that Sunday evening in August, Nixon announced the temporary suspension of dollar convertibility into gold, framing it as a necessary measure to protect the dollar from so-called international speculators. He promised it would be a short-term fix. It was none of those things. What truly happened was a default. Not the kind of spectacular default where a government openly refuses to pay its debts, but a quieter, more insidious kind. The United States defaulted by unilaterally changing the rules of the game, by devaluing the dollar and inflating away the promises it had made to the world. And that magic word, temporary, was the spoonful of sugar that made the medicine go down. Here we are, over 5 decades later, still living under this temporary measure. Because once governments get a taste of the unlimited money printer, they develop a habit they simply cannot kick. The gold window slammed shut and was never pried open again. From that point on, the dollar was backed by nothing more than faith. Faith in the government, faith in the economy, and faith that everyone else would continue to accept these pieces of paper as valuable. And that faith has been stretched to its limits every single day since. The repercussions were not felt overnight, and that is what makes this so dangerous. When a currency is debased, the damage does not happen all at once. It seeps into the economy slowly, like a colorless, odorless gas. You do not notice the danger until you are already collapsing. In 1971, the median price for a home in America was $25,000, while the median household income was about $10,000. The average house cost a mere 2.5 times the average yearly income. A family could realistically save for a down payment in just a few years and pay off their mortgage in a decade or two, often on a single salary. Fast forward to today. The median home price has skyrocketed to over $400,000, while the median household income hovers around $75,000. That is a ratio of more than 5 to 1. The math is not just worse, it is a completely different equation. But why did this happen? It is not because homes magically became twice as good or because we ran out of land. It is because the dollars you used to buy that house are worth substantially less. The devaluation has not been an accident. It has been both systematic and entirely intentional. Since 1971, the dollar has lost a staggering 87% of its purchasing power. What you could buy for $1 back then now costs you more than $7 today. But here is the real kicker. While wages have technically gone up, they have not come close to keeping pace. The things that truly define a stable life, like housing, healthcare, and education, have become astronomically expensive, far outpacing the general rate of inflation. The reason for this is deceptively simple. When a government prints new money, it does not get distributed evenly. The fresh cash goes to those closest to the source first. The big banks get it. Large corporations get access to cheap loans, and the wealthy see the value of their assets inflate. This new money trickles down through the system, and by the time it finally reaches the average worker in the form of a paycheck, prices have already been pushed higher. This phenomenon is known as the Cantillon effect, named after an economist from the 18th century who figured out that inflation is anything but neutral. Those who receive the new money first are the winners. Those who receive it last are the losers. And in our modern fiat currency system, you can bet that average workers and diligent savers are always at the back of the line. Now, here is something most people fail to grasp. Inflation is not just rising prices, it is a tax. It is a clandestine tax that requires no vote in Congress, no new legislation, and no public debate. When the government prints money, it actively dilutes the value of every single dollar you have saved. It is a tax on your savings, a tax on your salary, and a tax on your future. Consider this. If you had saved $10,000 in 1971 and stuffed it under your mattress, what would it buy you today? It certainly would not be $10,000 worth of goods. You would be lucky if it could buy you $1,300 worth. The government did not physically break into your house and steal 87% of your cash, but the end result is precisely the same. Your purchasing power was confiscated. And unlike the income tax, which you can see and argue about, the inflation tax is completely invisible. You feel it every time you go to the grocery store. You sense it when you pay your bills, but there is no line item to point to. There is no politician you can specifically vote out of office for raising it. And that is exactly why governments adore the inflation tax. It is politically convenient. The stated objective of the Federal Reserve is to maintain 2% inflation per year. 2% sounds tiny, manageable, almost trivial. But when compounded over time, 2% inflation slices the value of your money in half every 35 years. This means your retirement savings at age 30 will be worth half as much by the time you turn 65. And that is if they hit their target. This is not stability. It is a system of calculated theft. And here is an even more unsettling truth. The official inflation numbers are a masterclass in creative accounting. The Consumer Price Index, which is the government's official yardstick for inflation, has been repeatedly adjusted over the decades to understate the real cost of living. They often exclude volatile items like food and energy, the things people actually need. The result is an official rate that bears little resemblance to the financial reality people face every day. Just ask yourself, does your personal cost of living only increase by 2% each year? Do your rent, your groceries, your car insurance, and your healthcare premiums follow that gentle upward slope? Of course not. The real rate of inflation, measured by the necessities of survival, is significantly higher. But admitting that would be admitting that the entire system is fundamentally broken. Let us paint a picture. In 1970, your grandfather could graduate from high school, land a decent job at a factory or in an office, and within a few years, he could buy a modest house in a good neighborhood. They could raise a family, own a car or two, take an annual vacation, and save for retirement, all on a single income without the crushing burden of a college degree. Today, that entire scenario sounds like a fairy tale. A young couple now often needs 2 college degrees and 2 full-time incomes, frequently supplemented with side hustles, just to afford rent in a desirable area. Home ownership feels like a distant dream. Starting a family is a financially daunting prospect, and any unexpected expense can trigger a full-blown financial catastrophe. So what changed? People did not get lazier. Workers today are vastly more productive than they were in 1970, generating far more value per hour. Yet they can afford less. The answer, as always, comes back to 1971, when money was severed from the discipline of gold. The floodgates of debt and currency creation were thrown wide open. This tidal wave of new money did not spread out evenly. It flowed directly into asset prices, real estate, stocks, and bonds. The things that wealthy people already owned became exponentially more expensive, while the wages that average people rely on stagnated in real terms. The outcome has been a colossal transfer of wealth from the working class to the asset-owning class, from the young to the old, and from savers to borrowers. And here is the harsh reality. This is not going to stop. The government is addicted to the printing press and cannot quit. With a national debt soaring past $36 trillion and unfunded liabilities in the tens of trillions, every new crisis is met with the exact same solution: print more money. The system is no longer broken. It is working exactly as it was redesigned to. Central bank digital currencies, the next phase of this monetary experiment, will likely make things even worse. When your money is fully digital and programmable, the government will wield absolute control. They could monitor every transaction, freeze your funds, or even program your money to expire if you do not spend it quickly enough. The inflation tax will become instantaneous and surgically precise. So what can you possibly do? While you cannot fix the system alone, you can take steps to insulate yourself. Understand that holding cash is a guaranteed way to lose purchasing power over time. Seek out hard assets, things that cannot be created out of thin air. Most importantly, educate yourself on the rules of the game being played, so you do not remain a pawn in it. August 15th, 1971. That was the day the game changed, and nobody bothered to send you the new rulebook. Your grandparents could build a life on one income, because their money was an honest store of value. You are struggling because your money is designed to lose value. So ask yourself, how much longer are you willing to play a game that is rigged for you to lose? If this video opened your eyes, subscribe. Because understanding how you are being cheated is the first step toward protecting yourself.